Hi, this is Casey Davis, and I do apologize. The very beginning of this program was not recorded. What you missed was a discussion of the importance of knowing your water quality and how to test your water. Some key factors in testing your pond for water quality include getting an accurate sample, contacting your local county extension agent for the test, and then, of course, understanding the test results. Most county extension agents are equipped with a pond water testing kit. This kit tests for pH and alkalinity. Now, the pH will vary throughout the day due to the water temperature, so testing for alkalinity is your best measurement for the pond being too acidic or too alkaline. You can see on the screen here that fish prefer a pH between 6 and 8 in their habitat. But again, we measure the alkalinity to get a better representation of that. If the pond is too acidic, which is a common issue, we would recommend the addition of pasture or AgriLife to adjust the levels.
More than that per surface acre. Now, very few people really have the capability to do what you see these two gentlemen doing on that barge. They'll put the lime on the barge and they'll move around with a pump and wash it off in the lake as they go across the lake. A lot of people just don't have those kind of finances. And so putting the lime out as best you can around the edge may be the best that you can do. And that will make a difference. And another subject that comes up is, when should I do this? Well, you have to realize that we're recommending bulk lime because it takes a period of 60 to 90 days to break down. And that's why right now, during this late summer period into fall, is one of the best times that you can do it. If you try to do it in the spring when you're wanting quick reactions, it's just still going to take the time. If you wait until the winter rains or the fall rains start, a lot of times the spreader trucks can't get to your property. So calling and having this done at this particular time is excellent timing on the county agent's part to have this program for y'all so that you know to do it. But the first thing that you've got to do is see if you actually need it. And the best way to do that is to go down to your pond or your lake, take you an old cheap water bottle that we go to the stores and we buy our water in now, and take it down to the lake or the pond. And it doesn't make any difference where you get it, it's all going to be the same. Go to a place that's easy for you to get to. Now, I always tell people to rinse that water bottle out 2 or 3 times so we don't get any cross contamination. Pull us a water bottle full and take it into your county agent. Dr. Billy Higginbotham years ago got grant money so that all the county agents got the test kits they needed, so this could be done in each individual county rather than you trying to have to send it off to the Overton Research Center. So take it to your county agent. They will know how to do it, and they will be able to give you good advice on how much lime it's going to require. If you do need lime, you may not need to, but there's no way of knowing without testing. And let me give you an advisory here. Do not go into a feed store thinking you need lime and buy the sack lime, the powdered lime, because there's a high chance that you may get the kind that's in the sack that will cause too quick a change and will cause a fish kill. Now, when we're talking about our ponds and lakes, the question always comes up, well, mine is just muddy. And this, as you look at this picture, that's pretty muddy. So is that good or bad? Well, that's a good question. And the answer is bifold. It is both good or it can be bad. It all depends on what you're wanting to do with it. If you want this body of water, basically, as far as fish are concerned, to be nothing but, say, a catfish pond, which is perfectly fine and what most people seem to like anyway. A muddy pond is actually a great pond, because with a muddy pond like this, you're not going to have any vegetation problems. Look around the edge of that pond. You see all the vegetation creeping out of the water? Well, you may see a little bit over there on that real shallow side on the left-hand side of your picture, but everything else is clear. and that's and no vegetation. And the reason for that is sunlight can't get to the bottom to germinate the weed seed. So if you've got a catfish pond and it looks like this, and it's not bothering you that it looks like this, I wouldn't do a thing. I would leave it alone. Now, if you've got a pond and you're trying to run bass out there, they will starve to death trying to make a living in a pond like this. So once again, when people come in to talk to us about what should they do, what they want to do, always the first thing I do is, well, tell me what you want. What are your goals? And then we'll tell you how to get there. What we all want to do when we think about fish health is avoid this scene, dead fish. Well, what caused this? Well, you know, if you've already taken our recommendations and you've lined the pond and you've got the ecosystem where it needs to be, most likely what's taking place here is an oxygen depletion. And this is the time of year, once again, great timing on your county agent's part to have this program. It's great timing to have this program because we're already having calls from people who are seeing this very thing. Now, what takes place here? Well, it's just overloaded with more pounds of fish than what the body of water can hold. The general rule of thumb is that each acre, surface acre of water can support 1,000 pounds of fish. But what happens is people will go in there and they say may stock 400 or 500 pounds or 400 or 500 catfish who might be 4 to 6 inches in length, and then they start pouring the feed to them. Well, catfish are going to respond very well to a feed sack. They're the closest thing that we have to a feedlot cow as far as fish are concerned. And you can have catfish and just have a feed sack and have great success. But if you're not harvesting, or if you're overfeeding, or you're trying to do this without artificial aeration, you are looking for problems. And right now is a dangerous time of the year, a good time of the day to go out there and check your pond, see if you actually have some potential problems developing. Is first thing in the morning, because the first thing in the morning is going to be the lowest point of oxygen in your ponds, because during the day, sunlight is generating oxygen with the contact from the sun into the water. Now, what happens is we get into this time of the year, into August, we start getting those 2 and 3, 4 days of cloudy weather. Look out, because you're liable to see something like this take place. Now, aeration. What can we learn from the experts? Well, who are the experts? Well, quite honestly, they're all around us. Every one of our cities are experts on the aeration of water because they are running these treatment plants. That's right. They're running treatment plants and dealing with potentially bad problems coming into their system. Now, when they're dealing with bad and potentially disease-ridden water, how do they deal with this? Because they don't have much time to do it. There's no choice. They have high levels of oxygen going into that water so that the natural bacteria they've got there is magnified by a huge amount and is able to clean that water up so that they can release it in a short period of time. Now, they've got to clean this water to state health code specifications. They've got to do it in a hurry. All right, looking at these two pictures, what's the difference? Well, you say one's a treatment plant, one's just a standard stock pond the cattle are in. Well, what do you think those cows are doing in there? They're not just in there sunbathing and then go out to use the bathroom. That's right. They're doing their business in there so that you're dealing with the same kind of problems that our city wastewater treatment plants are dealing with. And the principles are the same. You've got to have enough bacteria to be able to clean up that water, and aeration is the key. Water quality, water treatment plant, pond, or a water treatment plant. Aeration is the key in both of these circumstances. Now, talking about aeration, what are your choices here? Well, you can go with surface aerators or you can go with bottom bubblers. Let's talk about the one that I rarely recommend. We will help people with these if they just so insistent. But bottom bubblers are very labor intensive to install. They're labor intensive to keep going. They only help a very small area where those bubbles are coming up, and there's more parts to keep working. On the other hand, looking to the left, the surface area, simple to install, covers a large area, cheaper to purchase in cost and in operation. So there's your two primary choices, and something that everybody needs to think about if they want to try to provide as good a quality water, because you can't tell me that having good quality water doesn't translate to the bottom line in any kind of cattle operation. Properly
Hey, Ken, I've got a question.
Come on.
Just for me as an agent, I'm not really familiar with a lot of aeration, but the surface aerator, how does it run? Do you need?
You've got to have electricity.
Okay, so because I know that's probably the biggest question for a lot of folks out in their pasture, or if their ponds out in the woods, we don't all have electricity out there. So okay, good to know.
Well, and that's the thing. You've got to have electricity.
Okay.
Everybody's going to say, well, what about solar? Well, unfortunately, where one of these units on the left would run you, say, about $1,100, a solar unit is going to be between $8,000 and $10,000, and I don't run into too many people that want to fork up that kind of money. And that's why also you county agents recommended years and years ago to everybody, fence that pond off and run a siphon over the back so your cattle can be watered down there and they won't be going in there polluting the water that they're trying to drink. Okay? All right. Properly balanced water allows the natural ecosystem to function the way it should. And the addition of aeration helps the natural bacteria to burn up contaminants and provide the cheapest insurance to avoid a fish die-off and provide better quality water for your cattle. Providing aeration to a pond is just like digging a pit, putting brush in it, and then putting a fan on it. Is that fire going to burn hotter? You better believe it, because you're pouring the air to it. Same concept. Okay, once again, so what do I do? Well, your first step, once again, is your county agent. Go down to the pond, pull a water sample. If you've got different ponds and different parts of the property that are really quite different, you probably need a sample in each one. But if the ponds are fairly close together, 9 times out of 10, one sample is going to let you know everything that you need to know about your water on your place. And while you're down there, since we're going to be dealing with weeds here in a few minutes, I always tell people, take a 5-gallon bucket, go down to your pond, get a big tooth rake, and put about, fill that bucket about 1/3 of the way full of water. And then go around and pull all the vegetation that you've got and bring it into your county agent. Now, your county agents are busy people, even in this COVID-19 situation. They have got more people to see than they've got time. And so if you'll help them out by pulling samples of your vegetation and your water, I would give right now, because of the situation, I'd give the office a call and make sure that they're going to be in the particular time that you're going to come. It won't take them long to run that water test, and it won't take them long to get identification of what you got. But now your part of it is when they start giving you these answers, don't trust your memory, because they're going to basically, for what most of you are used to, they're going to be talking in Greek. So you need to write it down so that you'll have the information that your county agent will give you, which will be very valuable and save you a lot of time and money. 2 more pond health concerns: blue-green algae and disease from feral ponds. This year in the January-February issue of Pond Boss, Dr. Wes Neal wrote an article that really got a lot of attention. It was a warning about blue-green algae. And he had noticed over these past years that last year particularly, a significant increase in calls about contamination, disease, and death affecting fish, dogs, livestock, and humans. As far as humans, it's more into the vomiting and seizures. The dead animals were reported in North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, and Wisconsin. Now, the problem is blue-green algae can be found in all ponds, but not all the time. And we're not still totally sure what triggers it. But one thing that he did warn about, and that is using algicide at this particular time could actually trigger an outbreak. Now, he did not give a reason, but if I were to make a guess based on my 40 plus years of doing this, I would guess that when you go in there with an algicide and you kill off that surface algae, that filamentous algae, that type of thing, you are adding more nutrient load into the pond. And then you're also going to cause probably an oxygen crash. And so this could always cause what you see there on the right. The other issue is one that we've been dealing with a long time. We don't think about it too much as far as our ponds, but we need to. You see what these hogs have done to beside the edge of this water. And the reason for that is the wild feral hog, number one, is the second smartest creature on the face of the earth as far as animals are concerned. Number two, they have learned to survive in any and every environment known to mankind. That's why they are spreading so across the world. And number three, there's only two things that cause them to, or they actually need. One is they've got to be close to water and they've got to be close to cover. And that is because the hog does not have sweat glands. And he's got to be able to have a place to drink plus a place to cool off, particularly in this Texas heat that we're going through. Now, some of the diseases that feral hogs may carry are tuberculosis, I always mispronounce this word, tularemia, and that's probably wrong, pseudorabies, and even anthrax. Pseudorabies is a viral disease of the central nervous system that can affect both domestic and feral hogs. Brian, you quit laughing at my pronunciation there. In addition, pseudorabies can fatally affect cattle, horses, goats, sheep, dogs, and cats. They're drawn to cover and water. They eat practically everything. Now, here is what we have learned in the recent past 5 to 10 years. There has been some great research going on here in Texas, over into Louisiana, Mississippi, over into the Carolinas, and the fact is the feral hog probably is now situated in every state in the Union. To understand the feral hog and to deal with this problem, you've got to understand a couple things. Number one, because of their reproduction rate, you must be able to remove at least 70% or above to break even. 70% to break even, anything above to do better. And when we talk about a herd of hogs, we're talking about a sounder. Now, one of the leading research institutes as far as agriculture is concerned is the Noble Research Institute up in Oklahoma. And they were the ones that really came up with a new tool here a few years ago. But let's look at the tools and what we have and how good they are. First of all, you see on your screen on the far left, you've got a scale from 0 to 100%, and then you see what each one of these tools can do. Now you look at snares. Snares are a good tool. The problem is they are a reluctant tool because most people are scared of killing their deer population as they get in them or killing the family dog. Box traps don't do much better than that, even though they're still being used. It's less than 10%. Now, unfortunately, and a lot of people are not going to believe this, but hunting with dogs, according to research, is only going to give you a 20 to 22% reduction rate. Now, am I telling you not to do that? No, I'm not saying that. It's a great sport. A lot of people enjoy it. A lot of people sell lots of firearms for the use of it. knock yourself out. But if you think you're going to do any good as far as removing the feral hogs off your property, you are sadly mistaken. Now, what Dr. Billy Higginbotham and so many others pushed for so many years was the use of the corral trap. But even the corral trap, you see by research, does good if it can hit 50%. So how did the Noble Research Institute come up with such a great tool? Well, actually, there was a young man up there, a graduate of Texas A&M by the name of Josh Gaskamp. He went to work for the Noble Research Institute, and he was doing research on deer. Well, to do research on deer, he was putting out corn so that he could trap them and put test equipment on them. And in so doing, he wasn't having too much success because whenever he put out the corn, the hogs would get it. And so they devised a way to remove the hogs. They had a drop net that they were going to use on the deer, and they just dropped it on the hogs, and it worked good. So from there, they got into the research and actually developed what is now known as the boar buster. Now, even more recent research was done by none other than Dr. Jamie Sugg right here in Rusk County. Last year, what Jamie decided to do was, based on the news and the facts that we had on the round dropping trout, he wanted to put it up against the corral trap that A&M had recommended for so long. So he sent out a release to everyone in the county that had hog problems to get back with him. Well, you can imagine what the return was like. They covered him up. And so he went out, looked at various sites, and selected 4. Now, the whole issue was to put the corral trap on even footing with a boar buster and see what they would do head to head. So on the far left-hand side of your screen, site 1 was used as control. Only the corral trap was placed, and it was the procedures were all according to what Dr. Higginbotham said. It's not an event, it's a process. And sure enough, the research proved that out. They had one good catch out there, and then the hogs would not return. They removed, because they had game cameras out there so that they could inventory at each of these sites and know exactly what was there. They were able to remove 50% of the hogs that were known to be there. So they went on to site 2. At site 2 was where the real research began. He had already been baiting this area for about a week, and with his game cameras, he knew how many sounders, how many, that type of thing, were coming in. So they took a corral trap that they had funds to buy, the standard cattle panels, the trip doors, the whole 9 yards, that like everybody does with corral traps. And they set one up about 20 feet from the feed site. On the other side, about 20 feet, they set up a boar buster. Inside of both traps, they dumped a 5-gallon bucket of corn in the very center. All things were the same except for one thing. On the corral trap, to give it a little extra boost, he took and trailed corn back to the trail where the hogs were coming in. This was not done for the boar buster. So the first night when the trap was set up, there was no activity. But on the second night, the boar buster was activated 2 different times. And of the number of hogs that were there, they removed 95% in those first 2 days. The corral trap, only 2%. There was one little small piglet that went into that trap. So then they move on to the third site. Same situation, identical baiting, traps set basically about 40 feet apart, 20 feet from where the baiting site was. The results were very similar. Only this time it took place on the very first night. They had a drop, and then I think then the next night they had another drop. In any case, they removed 93% of the feral hogs. Now remember, what do we tell you about the feral hogs? You've got to remove 70% or better of the sounder to be able to have any success. Well, that's just what the boar buster did. 95%, then 93%. At the fourth site, the property owner had heard about what had taken place. He said, don't even put the corral trap up. I want the boar buster out here. And in that particular case, it was 90%. Taking this research, Jamie was very anxious because it was so lopsided. And so he reached out to who is considered to be one of the top gurus as far as feral hogs are concerned, Dr. Bronson Strickland at Mississippi State. And he sent him this information. And Dr. Strickland wrote back in an email, and you see the letter. Dr. So, I'm interested in hearing your conclusions. Unfortunately, we were not able to conduct a formal test. The reason is that using a drop corral style trap like the boar buster was so much more effective. My team used that trap exclusively as we had a limited amount of time for them to trap post deer season and pre-crop planting. In their experience, they were able to capture pigs in half the time it took to capture with a traditional corral trap with an electronic drop gate. Now, understand what he's saying here. There are some companies out there that are using standard corral traps, but they have the electronic drop gates. Over in Mississippi, they don't even mess with those. Many professional trappers in my area have shifted exclusively to a boar buster style trap for the same reason: time to capture is sooner. And that's Dr. Bronson Strickland. There is the view of what a boar buster looks like. And when we're thinking about the quality of our pond water, we've got to be concerned with these varmints getting in there and causing disease that could spread to our animals. Okay, we're not going to take a bathroom break. We're going to move on. Now, part two, pond weeds and their control. Would you believe in Texas, there's over 1.2 million ponds and lakes, and mostly here in East Texas. So it's easy to understand that the most asked question of county agents has to do with pond weeds. Now, when we're talking about pond weeds, they're all going to fall in one of four categories. You've got your algae, like this filamentous algae here that you see on this pond, very, very common throughout the South. You've got your floating plants, such as duckweed. You see pictures of that. We've got our submerged plants, such as coontail and southern naiad. This is what a lot of people refer to as, I've got moss in my pond. When they talk about algae, we hear, well, I've got scum in my pond. Well, once again, it always gets back to identification, and that's why I'm saying pull samples and take them to your county agent. In terms of moss and scum is not going to help them very much. Then we've got the emergent plants, such as primrose and water lilies. All of these are going to fall into four brackets. Now, the key or the first step in this is identification. Once again, here we go right back to your AgriLife agent. He's got publications that he can give you. There's things on the web and programs. You see that website right there. That's a good site to look at. And the only problem is a lot of these websites and even aquaplant, what you may have may not look just like it. And that's why a hands-on look at by your county agent is going to be very important. Now, one sheet that he will give you front and back is this sheet that was developed by Texas A&M, and it is a great, great tool because it breaks the pond weeds down into those four brackets: algae, floating plants, and submerged plants. And there's the emergent plants over on the back. Back to the first page, you can look on the left-hand side, and if your county agent tells you what you've got, there's your list of weeds that you can refer to. Then if you decide you are going to want to treat it with chemical or biological, you're going to see some options going out there beside, and you see four different options as far as whether it's going to be excellent, good, poor, or fair. And you don't want to ever spend your money on anything that's only unless it's excellent or good. Now, our controls for our pond weeds falls under 3 categories: mechanical, chemical, and biological. Now, I'm not going to say much about mechanical because Vernon is going to be talking probably along the lines of this to a certain extent, but you can always go in with a trico or backhoe and deepen the sides of your pond, get them down where they're 3 foot or 4 foot or more, and when you stop the sunlight from going to the bottom, you're going to stop the weeds from coming up on the side. The other option is chemical, and the third option is biological. Here's such a picture that you might think about as far as the mechanical end of it. Chemical, the big Band-Aid. Realize that if you're going to do anything chemical, it's not going to last. It's going to give you a little short-time relief. And you are going to, if you want to follow the recommendations, or you would want to follow the recommendations of the county agent as far as which of the chemicals to use. One chemical doesn't do the job on everything. And here's a warning that I never pass up to pass along. Do not put Carmex into your ponds. It will cause cancer. And being against the label, it could be a possible arrest involved there. Life is too short just because it's cheap. Go down there and spread Carmex along the edge of your pond to kill the weeds. Remember now, your cattle are going in there. And what about those grandkids going down there to fish? Do not do it.
Hey Ken, what is Carmex? I've never heard of that.
Okay, Carmex is actually a soil sterilant. It is a tremendous tool for what you want to use. And you see over on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a product called Alligator or Diuron. People will use it along their fence rows. You want to clean up a fence row where you don't have to be mowing right up next to the fence. That's what you want to use. It's a soil sterilant, and it's a great tool for that. It's just not designed to be put in water. So don't do it. Did I get you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. What about our biological controls? We have 2 biological controls approved for the state of Texas. On the left-hand side, you'll see the one that everybody, I think, has heard about, and that's the sterile grass carp. We can't raise them here in the state. We have to get them out of an approved federal location. One of the main ones that most of Texas units comes in from Oklahoma. And then the other is the Mozambique tilapia. So let's talk about these 2 things. Now, when we're choosing between these 3 options, mechanical, chemical, and biological, biological is going to be the fastest growing, and for the 2 reasons, cost and labor. When we look at sterile grass carp, we want to remember this. This is a permitted fish. You're going to have to make application to Texas Parks and Wildlife for an application to get sterile grass carp before you can ever purchase any. Now, the different rules and laws apply for different states, but for the state of Texas, they will allow you up to 10 grass carp per surface acre. And I encourage everybody to try to obtain 10 permits per surface acre. I'm not telling you to buy and put in 10 per surface acre. I'm telling you to get those permits so you can get the government out of your business. What you probably want to do is, any good biologist will tell you, you probably want to go in and only put half that many, hang on to the rest of those permits, and if they're not doing the job in a year or 2, you can always go back and add some because you'll have permits in hand. Now, how long do they last? Well, you're going to get about 8 years of service. Usually the first year you put them in, you're probably not going to see much help from them. But years 2 through 9, they will do a good job if you've got them stocked properly. Now, after that, they look like miniature submarines out there, and they really don't eat much. Now, Texas has found a way to tax you on this, because to file this application, you've got to send it in with a $16 fee and $2 for every fish that you want to buy. Now, you haven't bought the first fish, but that's what it's going to cost you from Texas Parks and Wildlife in Austin. Now, let's talk about tilapia and why it's growing so fast. Chemical versus tilapia. On the left-hand side is one of the chemicals that you have option to. 1 gallon of this chemical treats 2.67 surface acres at a cost of $985. And this cost per gallon of $2,600, I think, is from last year's figures. I'm not for sure exactly what it is this year, because quite honestly, we never get any calls for it because it's too John Brown expensive. So looking what your cost is of $985 per acre, now look to your right. Tilapia stocked at 10 to 30 pounds per surface acre. That's the normal rate up to a high rate. Your cost on that control is $140 to $420. So you see, even at the high rate, it's less than half. So what do the tilapia actually do? Well, unlike the sterile grass carp, they are actually going to do 3 jobs for you instead of just 1. Sterile grass carp is just going to be out there to control 1 of those 4 areas of vegetation we mentioned a few minutes ago. The tilapia are going to work on 2 of the 4 weed groups. And then, unfortunately, there's 1 weed group where neither one of them are going to help you. But what do the tilapia do? Well, vegetation control in 2 of the 4 weed groups. Number 2, they will put more pounds of gain on your bass and your catfish that you've got in your lake than really anything else that you can have in there. Now, you cannot get by without having the bluegill. That's your base foundation. But when it comes time to putting the groceries on the table, and that's what it takes to make your bass and catfish grow, you can't beat the tilapia. And the reason for that is how fast they proliferate. And the third thing is they're great for mosquito suppression. So they are the best solution for mature ponds and lakes, and the lowest cost option with the greatest amount of forage. They'll work for you in the spring and summer and the fall, and then they surrender as feed for your bass and catfish, which gets back to the point, you do have to restock these every spring. They're going to go in there, they're going to work for you in the spring, summer, and the fall, and then basically your bass and your catfish are going to clean them out so that you have to restock the next spring. And people say, well, I've heard, they all die off. Well, that's wrong. What you're going to find is basically 70, 80, maybe even as much as 90% of them are going to be consumed by the fish that you're trying to keep. And you'll only have a 5 to 10% die-off. Where can you find these? Well, in this area, as far as where we're talking tonight, they're available in Canton, Clarksville, Greenville, Sulphur Springs, and of course at the farm in Henderson at Boatcycle. Mozambique tilapia, another tool in the toolbox. So how do you clean water? Well, number 1, you remove or break down the solids. That's what the tilapia do, because actually what they're doing, they're going down into all that muck you've got into the bottom of the pond. They're breaking it up so that that aerator that you put in there can burn it up with oxygen and bacteria. Water quality, the key to it, if it'll support fish, you've got good water quality. And if it's good for your fish, it's good for your cattle and your livestock. There's many other things that we can talk about, but I'm beginning to run out of time, and our line is always available for any of you that have calls. So many times I have a lot of the county agents all over the eastern part of the state. Don't get too many from the western part of the state. They don't have much water. But in the eastern part of the state, I have calls from county agents all the time, as they'll have somebody to come in, have a question, and we'll have a little 3-way conversation so that we can get you taken care of. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. And as they say in Congress, I will relinquish the rest of my time.
Ken, we do have a question in the chat. It says, would that mean don't use Carmex or Diuron along fences in low areas that might flood in heavy rains?
Okay, if you are concerned that your water along that fence row is going to make its way down to the pond, no, don't do that.
Okay.
It's a management decision on everybody's part. We always tell people when they come in here, there's really very few that actually on their fence rows are spraying near their ponds, but we always warn them, do not put this stuff out under the drip line of a big pretty tree that you don't want to kill, because it's going to kill it as well. Stop at the drip line.
All right. Does anybody else have questions? You can unmute yourself if you like, if you want to ask your question out loud.
I guarantee you I won't bite you from Henderson.
Oh, will you go back to the page on where to get tilapia? And then what is Boatcycle's address?
Okay. Our address in Henderson is 213 North Van Buren. 213 North Van Buren. And the Northeast Texas Farmers Co-op offers these at all of their locations. Now, the time to put them in is from the basically mid to end of March until the end of May, because you've got to give them time to do the job that you're paying for. And don't be surprised that you're not actually getting that many fish, because it's what these little fish will do. Let me give you an example. One of our best breeding forage fish that we have in our ponds and lake, bluegill. And you're lucky if you can get 2, maybe even 3 spawns during the growing season. But tilapia breed anywhere from 6 weeks, every 6 weeks, all the way down when we're in the midsummer like we are right now. Every 3 weeks, these fish are breeding, putting out more fry. And that's why they do such a tremendous job as far as vegetation control, mosquito suppression, and growing trophy bass. And yet you still got control, because if we did not have the overwintering issue where they will not make it through, it wouldn't be long, because that would be all you'd have in there. And they don't bite a hook very good. They are a tool in your toolbox.
Ken, and you can correct me because I'm sure I'm not providing all the information. Isn't there a certain breed or type of fish that does have to be removed? Is that is that the grass carp? Like they get too large and will eat your bass or catfish? I feel like I heard that somewhere.
Really, the grass carp are really not going to bother. They are a grass-eating fish.
Okay.
It's really the other way around, Casey. When we stock grass carp, when we stock grass carp into a lake, we always want to be sure, our pond, we always want to be sure that we're putting between a 10 and a 12-inch fish in there, because anything any smaller is likely to become a bass meal, and that's expensive eating. They're only going to work on the vegetation. Now, there's one thing: if you like to feed your catfish, they're going to come up there and take advantage of it.
Okay. Now, Something else I heard, once grass carp get too large, did they become ineffective?
Yes. That's what I
Okay.
mentioned, that's what I mentioned a while ago. You're only
Okay,
going,
I must have missed that.
only going to get about 8 years of service out of them. Usually,
Oh, you did say that. Okay, sorry.
the first year that you put them in, you're not going to see much, but years 2 through 9, they ought to do a great job if you stock them correctly.
Okay.
After that, they will continue to live 3, 4, 5 years before they actually die. But it just looks like you've got some small sharks out there in the water as they tool
Okay.
around through there.
That's right. I'm sorry. I did hear you say that. I was
But
tuned out. Yes.
they're not going to make a living for you doing that. And what you have to do at that point is you start to see vegetation redeveloping that they have under control. You've got to go back through the permitting process if you don't have permits left in the file.
Okay. Another question, which Vernon might get to this, but are there cost shares related to pond management? And again, Vernon Griffin's probably going to be our go-to to discuss that, James.
Now that sounds like more construction, and I'll leave that to Vernon.
Yeah, so we'll cover that later, James. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Will has a question. Let me. Wanting to put in a pond, need help to decide where to put it on my property. So Will, that's also going to be a Vernon question, and he's going to talk about pond construction. So we'll cover those two questions later. Any more questions about pond health, stocking rate, weeds, algae, anything like that?
We do have a website, www.boatcycle.com.
I'm going to put that in the chat.
www.boatcycle.com, and
Okay.
we also have an 800 number for people that have some questions.
Okay. What is that 800 number? And I'll type it in.
800-333-9154.
9154. 800-333-9154.
That's it.
All right, so both of those are in the chat, guys. You can copy that down. I also put the address in the chat. Okay, well, Ken, I really appreciate it. I know I always learn something because, like you said, ponds are a big part of what we have questions about. So I always appreciate you and teaching us something. And thanks for working with us on this technology.
Well, people don't realize just how important a job y'all do for the state, and I see it day in and day out. Y'all don't get the credit or the thanks that you deserve, and we appreciate being able to work with you folks.
Well, thank you. All right, lots of thank yous coming in the chat for you, Ken. So very, very much appreciated talk. And I will, if you will stop sharing your screen, and we'll let Vernon start sharing his.
Give me just a second. Let me get stop sharing the screen. I've got to get
Yes,
out.
sir.
Get out of the way.
Alrighty. All right, Vernon, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I unmuted. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see it. Again, it's just not in the presentation mode, which should be that little at the very top in the orange bar should be the one. It looks like a podium to me. It's like a box with a line coming out the bottom.
That do it? No? Okay, let me back up here.
Or I think you can also go where it says slideshow. Let me see if that's. Okay, yeah. If on your screen there, if you go to slideshow in the top, across the top, and start from the beginning, click on slideshow and then from beginning. That should put you.
Okay.
There you go. Yep. Now we've got your presentation.
You got me some music.
They sure do.
Okay, I'm Vernon Griffin. I'm with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I'm the civil engineering tech here in Mount Pleasant, Texas. Can you see me, Casey? Is my camera on? Or?
Yes, sir. Your camera's on. I can see you in the bottom and your screen up top.
Okay. All right. And working with, well, I was working 9 counties, but now I've lost 2 counties, Upshur County and Kemp County. So I am working Titus, Kemp, Franklin, Morris. I also go over to Bowie County, Cass County, and also just south of Cass County there, over into Jefferson. So I cover quite a bit of area with the USDA Soil Conservation Service. I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly, so I'll be probably giving you back a lot of your time, Casey. And if you got some questions, if you would, just go ahead and jump in as I go through the program, if that's okay with you. Just go ahead and take the questions along as we go. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I had muted myself. So yeah, we'll follow along in the chat, and questions that come up, you can answer them. The 2 questions that had already been asked, which you can cover as you get to it, is wanting to put in a pond, need help to decide where is the best place. Who can help me with that? And then are there cost shares related to pond management? So as you get to those topics.
Okay, that's going to be probably the first slide. They're locating a pond site. What I like to do to the person that asked that question, I like to make an appointment with the landowner and go out to their farm and look at the location. We do have the technology now to where we can actually pull up a lot of the information on computer and tell pretty much everything that you need to know. But I like to go out on the ground and get with the landowner and walk around. A lot of times we miss space that may make a good pond site. But one of the main things you want to look for when you're looking for a pond site is going to be your soil type. That's going to be your critical element. We got several things that we look at: soil, drainage, topography, the main 3 that you want to consider. So, and then you want to look at the fact, what do I want a pond for? What are my needs? Do I want the pond for livestock water? Do I want the pond for an erosion control, irrigation, fire protection, fish production, waterfowl, wildlife? There's so many purposes for a pond. So you want to say, well, I want a pond for livestock water. We get that request a lot. Then we will go out and we will look at the location and determine if it's a dam site, which may be an embankment type pond or an excavated or pit type pond. Grade stabilization structures are used to help control erosions. We don't do very many of those here in the 4 county or the 5 or 6 county area. The further north you go up into the Blacklands, you get a lot of those grade stabilization structures and water control structures. Where they've got lots of drainage coming. Locating a pond site is one of the first steps in planning a pond. And a lot depends on like I say, the soil type and the location itself. If you're in urban area or if you're out in the country or you're just outside the city limits, a lot of these things will come into play simply because where you put your structure, and we'll get into this on a couple of slides later on, where you put your structure, you don't want to have any downstream hazards. So you want to look at that before you start construction. And we'll look at that on the ground as we walk around the field. Staking out the pond will be necessary to make sure that the pond will work in a chosen spot. Now, many times I'll go out and you say, well, do we have to put this pond where you say it has to be? No, you don't have to put the pond where. I say we want to try to work with the landowner as close as possible because we want to make it fit your farming operation. So you know where you're going to be running your cattle, or if you're going to be rotating your cattle from this pasture to that pasture, or if you just want a pond for recreation, for fishing. So we try to put it in the location that would best fit your operation. Now, if we see that there's an issue with the soil, say for instance, and you could have 3 or 4 different soils on 20-acre place, or you could have a 50-acre pasture and have 3 or 4 different types of soils there. Just because there's a nice draw that runs through there or drainage area doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good pond site. So just remember that our basic starting point is going to be the soils. If we got good soils, we got good building material, then we can move to the next step. Without the good building material, we probably need to look at another location. We do use lasers. They are more accurate, and it's just kind of more or less a one-man show, so to speak. And we'll go out and set the water line for you. We use topographic maps. This helps us determine, I don't know if you can see my arrow there on the screen. This blue area may be where you want to put a pond. This red line that goes up here represents your drainage pattern.
We are not seeing that. You're on the using topography maps slide.
Okay. All right, let me see if it now. That map pop up there?
Yep,
okay.
Now we're there.
Okay. So many times you say, well, okay, I want a pond right here because I'm going to build me a house over here in this area, and I'd like to have my corrals here, and I'm going to cross fence it. So many different options. But a lot of times Mother Nature is just not as kind to you. It pretty well dictates where you're going to put a good pond. Now, you can actually go just about anywhere and dig a hole, but you want it to stay full. So you want your reservoir to be full year-round, if possible. Now, during the summer months, quite naturally, June, July, and August, your water level is going to drop. But you want to have enough drainage, and that's what this topo map shows, your drainage pattern. And we can pull up the topo map. If you use this yellow line as your property, assuming that's your property, and this area here, where the blue that I'm circling, is where you want to put your pond, we would do a soil sample, and then I would double check the topography to make sure that you have enough drainage here going into this area to keep the pond full. So if this is a 2-acre lake or a 3-acre pond, do I have enough drainage to keep this pond full throughout the year? And several different factors come into play there as well. But here in East Texas, if you've got anywhere between 20 and 60 acres, you're gonna pretty well keep your medium-sized ponds full of water year-round with the average annual rainfall. Now we have years where quite naturally we're gonna have more rainfall than others, but with 48, 49, 50 inches average annual rainfall in East Texas, then 25, 30 acres of drainage going into a 2-acre pond, I would not be afraid of that, especially if you've got good building material, good clay material there. But you can get too much water going into an area, so we have to watch for that as well. But we have the topography maps and we have the soils maps. The soils has been mapped years ago, and we have the technology now on the computer, so all we have to do is just pull up the soils information, and you can pull that information up also now. And if you've got soils that are sandy, gravelly, or you may want to look at a different location for putting a pond, because those materials are porous materials and water just goes through those. So you don't want to spend $12,000, $15,000 on a structure and go out there and you got 2 or 3 foot of water there. And I've come across that a lot. And but the pre-planning part will help prevent that. I was out on several places. The further south you go from Mount Pleasant, Upshur, Camp, Upshur, Gregg, you get a lot of sand in certain areas. Now, Camp County's got areas that are pretty sandy as well. But we're there to help guide the landowner to find the best spot. We're not there to tell the landowner what he can or can't do. But we want to provide you the information you need to help make the right decisions. Now on the next slide, if you get an estimate on what it would cost to actually put in a structure in that area, most contractors will have instruments, lasers, tripods, etc., that they can set up and go out and give you an estimate on what it would cost. If not, we have that ability here at the NRCS office, and we can actually provide you with an estimate, should it be within our design authority. What I mean by that is, a lot of times we pull the maps up, and on the drainage area, it may have 200 acres of watershed coming through that particular area. The landowner's not aware of that because he haven't pulled up the topo map. But that's where the landowner may want to put a pond. But once I pull that information up and look at it, and I said, well, you've got 150 acres of drainage coming through there. Are you sure you want to manage that amount of water? Because it's going to take more than just a regular spillway, earthen spillway. You will need a pipe structure and this type of thing. So a lot of times when we pull our topo maps, we can actually look at the area and tell the landowner, well, you've got a better site over here, or you've got a better site over there. And it's up to the landowner to make that call if he wants to pursue that. But a lot of times, landowners already can see that cabin on that hill right there, and they want that pond right there, regardless if it's 200 acres or 100 acres coming through there. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's just that you want to be aware. You want to design it for the worst case scenario, because you're going to have those rainfalls that's going to come through. And then when that pond fills up, you want to have a safe exit for the water. And we can help make that call for you. So when you get an estimate on the yardage, most in this particular area here, Northeast Texas, Titles County, Camp County, mostly you're going to go about $2 per cubic yard. You say, well, how do you get the cubic yards? Well, we have a method that we'll go out and chain where the dam is going to go and take elevation shots periodically, 50 feet, take an elevation, 50 feet, take an elevation, 50 feet, taken, until we get the total distance of the dam or the proposed dam. So if you got a dam that's going to be about 300 foot long, 14 feet high, and you're going to back up 2.5 surface acre of water, then you want to know approximately what that structure is going to cost you before you move forward, and we can help you with that. Some location may require a site prep before the actual pond construction can begin. Now, what that means, most sites, you don't just go out with the contractor and start pushing dirt. Most sites, you'll have to move trees, rocks, or what have you in order to start construction. So you want to remove those trees and stumps for sure where the dam is going to go, because the tree stumps eventually will rot and leave a cavity there, and then you got problems later on. So you definitely want to remove all your tree stumps, large rocks, etc., where the dam is going. Now, where you're going to bag water, if you want a fish habitat upstream, that's fine, because that's going to be underwater. But where your structure is going to be built, you want to remove all those tree stumps. Knowing the water's edge can help make sure that the pond does not get larger than intended. What that's saying is simply shooting a water line. And you say, well, how do we know the water line? Well, for instance, I take the example that I had today. Went out on a Landowners. He said, I want water to come right here. He's already got his plans in mind, where he wants to put his cabin, where he wants to put his house, etc. He said, I want the water level to come right here. I said, well, okay, you have painted an imaginary X on the ground, and we can work off of that. So we'll take that elevation and work backwards, back towards the dam. Then when we get to the dam, we'll know how tall the dam is going to be based on where he wants to put his spillway, put his water level. Well, in his case, as we walk back towards the dam, the more trees, the bigger trees got into the water. He said, oh no, I don't want the water. I said, well, the X on the ground that you put up there, if you want water to go that far up, then you're going to have to remove all these trees here, because they're going to be underwater. You don't have to remove them, but they're going to die. So he said, oh no, we need to drop the spillway. So a water's edge determines basically where you're going to, when the pond fills up, where the water will be. So we can do that even before it's got any water in it. We can tell you pretty close to where exactly where the water level is going to be. Should that be pecan tree that you want to spur, or that big red oak, whatever the case may be, we can make that a control point and work off of it. So we don't kill that big oak. As we said earlier, the suitability of a pond depends on the ability of the soils. And we do have a soil survey for Camp Titles, Franklin, and Morris County, free to the public. We also have other soil surveys, and they're online now, so you can go online and get a copy of your soil survey of your particular county. They are very helpful. Got lots of information there, not just for ponds, but you may want to plant trees, or you may want to plant a garden, or whatever case may be. There's a lot of information in the soil survey. Sometimes we have to do a soils boring, as you see there at the last one, to kind of more or less confirm. If I look on the soils map, let's say, for instance, let me go to this soils map for you. If I look on this soils map, you may be able to see those little white letters there. Those are soil types. That tells me, NA right there tells me that that's a Nahatchee. This CSE tells me that that's a Cuthbert soil. This TAA is a Tenahall, that's sandy. Lilbert, that's a sandy soil. So I've worked with these soils enough to know that once I see a particular soil, I can say, well, hey, there's going to be too much sand. But that's from looking at the computer. So I schedule a field visit and go out and actually do a soils boring and confirm what the soil survey says, if we need to. A lot of times it's pretty cut and dried once you look at it on the soil survey. So this pond here, for instance, if he wanted to build this pond in this particular soil, if you follow that black line, everything inside of this black line is going to be the name of that particular soil that he would be building it on, which I think I went off the screen here. So we have that information available to the landowner, and we will actually go through those steps with you when deciding on where to put a pond. Now, a lot of people say, well, can I treat, I've got a lot of sand, can I treat my soil with certain chemicals so that it doesn't leak? Soils that do not have a good clay are sealed by compaction with the equipment during construction. Sites where soils are unsuitable can be treated with various other measures, but can be expensive. And that's one of the things that Ken brought up on the bentonite issue. It's very expensive. You can treat that soil, but by the time you treat a pond that's 2 acres, 2 surface acres, you're probably gonna double your cost of what it would cost to build that structure. So if it costs $8,000 to build that pond, by the time you get through treating it with bentonite, and it's not a guarantee, we don't recommend sealing it with bentonite. If we can't find a good clay, natural clay base, we strongly recommend you look at another location because of the cost involved. But it can be done with enough money. And bentonite is just the clay itself. It just has the ability to absorb, and kind of like a sponge on a counter. Once the sponge sits on that counter for so long, it dries up, but you put water on it, it expands. And that's kind of how bentonite works. It just kind of more or less absorbs a lot of your. But like I say, it's very expensive to go that route. But I want to show you that option is there. Just look at, okay, we talked about removing the stumps from large rocks. We don't want to bury those in the dam because they're going to eventually decay, and that will leave a void in there, and you can have problems down the road. We are now fortunate enough to have the lasers to where we can actually go to the field with the landowner. Like I say, it's kind of a one-man show, so I can take this laser, leave it sitting up, and I can walk all around the area that you want to put water and flag it for you, flag your water line, and say, okay, this is where water's gonna come to if we stop the dam here, and so forth. Spillways. We don't recommend concrete in the spillway. They're pretty for about a year or two. And after about 2 years, all that money that was spent on concrete, the water is actually going up under the concrete. So what we do, we actually design vegetated spillways. We try to put it on a 25-year storm frequency so that it doesn't go around as often. But you're going to have in this area, like I say, 50 inches of rainfall per year. So you're gonna function. So you may not get that 4-inch rain, or you may not get that 3-inch rain all the time, but one day you're gonna get that 4, 5, 6-inch rain, and your pond is already full, and so the water's got to exit. So we designed that spillway to handle a foot of flow, and so that it would be wide enough to where it does not erode as it goes out of the spillway. So we have to allow enough room for that exit channel. Also, as you on a vegetated spillway or a grass spillway, as the water goes, you can visualize the water going out of the dam coming around the back side. We have to leave enough room from the property line fence so that it doesn't get on your neighbor's property. Otherwise, we would be diverting water onto your neighbor, and that would not be good if we didn't get permission. A lot of times the landowner next door will give the neighbor permission to divert water, but we want to try to divert that water into its natural creek channel before it leaves your property, and then that way we won't have any problems. So in order to do that, we have to leave enough room between the property line and where we put the dam. But that's all part of the design. Pipes can be expensive as well. Most of the times, I don't. If you're under 40 acres of watershed, you really don't need to pipe. That pipe would just really be optional. Once you exceed 40, you get up to 50, 60, 70, 80 acres of watershed, you may want to consider putting in some type of pipe structure. And it depends on how much water is actually coming through there, depending on the diameter of the pipe. But if you can actually put a good earthen spillway in and keep it vegetated, is probably the best way to go. But in some cases, the pipes are good, especially if you're going to be driving across it daily. Like your driveway to your house, you may want to put a pipe in, even though you may not have a 25 acres of watershed, but you want to keep that spillway dry as often as possible. So you set that pipe in there about 8 inches to a foot below your emergency spillway, and that'll allow your spillway to stay dry pretty well year round till you get the big rains. But that determines on how much water you're going to be running through that spillway, if you want to make a pipe mandatory or if you want to just make it optional. If you get above 80 acres of watershed, it's pretty well mandatory with USDA. Anything less than 80 acres of runoff, we have to look at the spillway site itself and determine if it needs a pipe. You can get by with a small 6-inch, 8-inch trickle tube in most cases. If you've got 50, 60 acres of drainage, you can get by there. That's a pipe. I don't know if you can see it functioning there. It's got a splash guard at the bottom, so when that water comes out of that pipe, you've seen those probably driving down county roads. You may have seen a pipe spilling out. This is a reverse riser, which means that it's actually on the back side of the dam, and it's also helping pull some of the dead water off the bottom of the pond. Any questions so far? I'm going too fast.
I don't see any questions. The two of y'all, let's see, who was it? James and Will. If you have any more questions to go along with your first question you asked, or if you didn't answer it or something, just let us know.
Okay.
Okay, this is Will. I was the one that was interested and want to have a pond built on my property,
Yes.
and are interested in setting up a meeting whenever it's convenient for you.
Okay.
And how would I go by getting in contact with you?
What county are you in, Will?
Marion County. I'm right in Smithland, right outside of Jefferson.
Yes, yes. Okay. Or when we get into the slide presentation, Casey, do you have my card? You don't have my card, do you?
No, sir, I do not, but I can type, if you want to shout your information out, I can type it in the chat for everybody.
Okay. Let me just do that now while we're at that point.
Okay.
It's Vernon Griffin. It's Griffin. And the office number is 903-572-5411, extension 3.
Okay.
And that way we can make an appointment. And right now I'm about 2 weeks out for any field visits right now due to, what all's going on. But we'll work it in. We'll get out there and look it over and give you some do's and don'ts, if nothing else.
Awesome.
That'll be great.
Yes,
A good time to call and leave, or would it be a good time to call, or what's the good time to call in your office?
Well, the office is always available. You may have to leave it on my voicemail, but just leave a message, and we'll check that voicemail and pull that off and give you a call back.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Will, you might, I know if you were in my county, I would love to go with y'all and participate in that because I always jump at the chance to learn. So you might let your county agent know too.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Is that you, Casey?
No, I believe you said you're in Marion County, right, Will?
Right, Marion County.
Marion. Okay, yeah. So that's is that Doug?
Doug Ware?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of times on damless pit type ponds, I flipped over to this and we'll just wrap it up. But on your pit type ponds, you have to have, or you would rather have a flat area so that you don't have to impound a lot of water. But your volume is there because the depth that you're going to get 10, 12 feet, 8 to 10 to 12 feet, no less than 8. Then that will give you your volume inside of the pit. And you want to leave an area so the cattle can walk in and out on a flat surface. So pit type doesn't take up near as much room. It's not as pretty as your dam or your excavated, of course, but it does supply many years of water because your volume. And then it's not as expensive if you got a good site. Great stabilization structures, like I say, they are normally up in the north of here, Paris area, in the Blacklands. They do a lot of those. Pipes such as this one, those are very expensive. We really don't do those. Actually get an engineer to come out and actually design you one, but with the cost being so expensive, we try to stay away from that just for livestock water. We try to stick with the smaller structures for horses, goats, sheep, livestock, that type of thing, cattle. Because when you get into structures such as this, then that pipe alone can cost up to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. Just depends on how much pipe you have to have. But sometimes what a person wants. This is erosion, real erosion on a pond or a dam. If we do not get vegetation on it, it's very important that we get a grass cover on the dam and the spillway to prevent the erosion. Sometimes you can actually come in and fence that dam off in order to keep the cattle off of the dam. It's kind of just like Ken was talking about fencing the water supply off to keep the cattle out of the water. You can also come in and temporarily fence that dam off until you get a good grass cover on it. We talked about keeping the roots and stumps out of the dam area, or you can also get little critters, beavers. They can come in, and nutria rats, otters can bury into the dam and cause damage. Casey, is it legal to hunt those now? I don't know. The beaver?
We still have a wildlife person.
Yeah.
His name has escaped me, but he still will come and do the trapping for the beavers. So if I can search through my business cards, I will find his name. And if anyone has questions about that, they can talk to him. So I'll put that in the chat when I find it.
That's great. Yeah, I have that come up a lot.
Dusty Allen is his name. I'll put his phone number in the chat. If anyone has beaver problems.
Well, good. All right. Do we have any other questions that you're interested in? Because ponds, there can be recreational, fishing, livestock, but USDA, the program that's available through EQIP is what you were asking earlier, is strictly for livestock water. So if we go out and you do have a site that's good enough to actually go in and put in a, let's say a 1 acre pond for livestock water, then there's a possibility for cost share assistance if you qualify for cost share assistance. And that's kind of a process within itself, but you can actually sign up for cost share assistance anytime throughout the year. Now, the funds are not available anytime throughout the year. They're allocated certain times of the year. But as far as if you're interested in a pond site, it's a good idea to just call me like you were talking a moment ago, and we'll go out and look at it, and it may save you some time and effort and say, okay, yes, this is a good spot. Maybe a good idea that you go in and sign up for cost share. And that way may save you some time. But we do have that program available through EQIP, Environmental Equality Incentive Practices. And that's one of the programs for livestock. But it's for livestock only.
All right, another question which you might be about to get to is how to fix a broken dam.
Well, that's what, see that little gentleman right there, if it wasn't a beaver that did it, or if it wasn't a tree stump that did it, and if you just had kind of a bad design, let's say for instance, if the spillway wasn't cut wide enough, or if it didn't allow enough freeboard from the top of the dam to the bottom of the spillway, and it actually went over the dam, and those can be kind of fixed. But if you've got beaver, if you've got trees that have decayed, a lot of times that can be a little bit more expensive to go in and fix those. So it just depends on what happened to the structure. And it could have been just a malfunction of the spillway, where it wasn't wide enough. It wasn't designed to carry the amount of water that was actually coming through there. several things. That's gonna require a field visit as well. I'd be glad to look at it for you. Yes. Now, before you do any digging, we want to do this right here. We all pretty well familiar with this dig test number now. It's 811. Call before you dig. That's very important. Even though the contractors out there doing the work, the landowner is responsible. So if he hit an 8-inch gas line, then the responsibility actually falls on the landowner and not the contractor.
Vernon, looks like Trina responded. She was the one who asked about the broken dam, and she responded and said, it looks like a washout from wildlife or water. Sorry, I was a little bit late on that.
That's okay. It would, on one like that, it depends on the age of the structure. If it was fairly new, or if it's been there 40, 50 years, it just depends. It will require a field visit to actually diagnose it the way it should be. I'll be glad to look at it with her. But what county is she in, Casey? Do you have an idea?
Trina is in Archer County.
Okay. Well, she'll need to contact her. I'm not sure where that is.
I'm not either.
But
Let's see.
I'm sure she's got a local NRCS office.
Okay, yeah, she's south of Wichita Falls, so you're on the other side of the world to us, Trina.
Yeah,
but I'm sure there is a local
NRCS
office there. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it would be one. I think it's actually one there in Wichita Falls. Yes. But just request a field visit to go and look at it. And a lot of times it depends on the age of the structure. If it's been there a long time, you may have tree roots that have grown up in it, and you may have to start all over. Or it may be something as simple as trapping the beaver. But that would require a field visit. Yes.
All right, Trina, I've got the phone number. I'm putting it in the chat for you.
Okay.
All right, another question. Does NRCS have a list of pond contractors for Marion County?
No. Well, let me say it like this. We do have a vendors list, but it's volunteer. We don't recommend anyone. It's actually volunteer. The contractors will come in and say, hey, can I get on the vendors list? We put their name on there. We may never see them again. But we do, to answer your question, there is a contractors list for Marion County. And I'll be glad to email it to her. But we definitely can't recommend one contractor over another, but we do have a vendors list.
And that's the same issue, I guess you could say, we run into with extension. We can't recommend a certain company name or brand name over another. So definitely understand that and try to share all the information equally, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Does everybody understand that dig test information? I'm sure most producers have come across this one way or the other, even if you're putting in fences or digging a swimming pool in the backyard, whatever the case may be, even though you know in your mind that there's not a structures, pipeline, gas lines out there, you want to have that confirmation number so that if by chance there happened to be something there that you're not aware of, you have confirmation that you call and check. But if you happen to hit something and didn't call, that's when it gets expensive. So before you dig that 3-acre lake, you want to make sure you call. You are the contractor. One of you, the contractor, can actually call also for you. Yes. Yes. That's all I have, Casey. And
All right.
if anyone has any other questions, I'll be glad to try to answer it.
All right. If anybody else has questions, just unmute or type them in the chat box.